September 23rd. Roll call, Jim Morrison.
Yeah.
Dan Orsby.
Here.
And Mark Eastman here. First item, the ARPA funds policy discussion. Anyone want to start? Or Sue, you want to start?
Well, you all had ideas. I put them on a list that I sent out to you this afternoon. Also in your packet was, we had talked about doing a survey and sending out some information so people knew what was going on and what we had and what it could be used for. And so I did a draft of the information piece and then a draft of what a survey could look like if you decided to do it in this format. You had X amount of things, and just asked people to rank them 1 to 10, so we'd have an idea what people thought was most important. And then there was a space at the bottom for them to write any other ideas that they thought would be pertinent. And those hash marks are just, they're supposed to have something next to them, which is a way to spend the money. But as I said, the list of items is that everyone identified. There were a lot of similar themes. A lot of you thought, that there were similar things to be done. So this is just a draft. If you want it to look some other way, or if you want some other kind of information provided, I can do that. I stuck primarily to what the rules say we can do in order to tell people, not give people the idea that this was some sort of blank checkbook that we could spend any old way we wanted to, because that's not the case. So I guess a good place to start might be, if you had to pick 10 of these items, what ones would you put on your list?
Go ahead, Kathy.
Well, I'll start. I think the waterfront repair and improvements is a big one.
I'd agree too, because that's a big ticket item that isn't going to be eaten up with administrative costs and everything. It could go directly towards something.
Yeah.
Senior center meals, I think, is high priority.
What's that?
Senior center meals.
Yep.
Yep.
Any others?
I think personally, from a town clerk's point, the Historical Society, I think we need to preserve our history for the town. I think that's an important issue.
I agree.
Dan, did they ever give an indication as to what that would cost for that? We're just talking the vapor barrier, correct?
Just the vapor barrier was $25,000, and then we had talked about the grant from the county that they could apply for, which I'm not sure what their total losses were when it comes to COVID. So, but it was up to $10,000 that you could get for that. So, I think there's, looking at it, I think it's the overall. What we need to do is going to be more than $25,000. The reality is that the right building for the Historical Society?
And I agree wholeheartedly with
Yeah.
you. I mean, putting a Band-Aid on it isn't going to save everything.
No.
Whereas we could have a discussion, that kind of funding, would it worthwhile to go towards the Masonic building and try to get them in there where they could have a year-round structure that would house things a lot easier.
Yep. I agree.
Can you tell us if the Americans with Disabilities Act says that there's a lot to be done there?
If you were going to use the second story, Jim. If it was just, my understanding, if it's the first story, you'd have the ramp to get in, so you'd still have access. The ones I had seen go towards it were going to need the second story and then you're into an elevator.
I just remember that from the discussion.
Oh, yeah.
before you guys said that.
And that was the case with some others.
Sue, correct me if I'm wrong, I think the county's looking into broadband, correct, with the county money? I know you're not on great terms.
The county is looking into a broadband project in some place in the county. There's,
Go ahead with your discussion we had. Go ahead. Please.
I will.
Okay.
They're looking at doing that, but it's going to be a small section of the county. And I'm not sure how successful that's going to be moving forward with them, because wherever it's going to be, everywhere else is going to get nothing. And that's an issue. And the second issue with broadband and investing millions in a technology that may be obsolete in 5 years is a concern. And I only say that. I have no crystal ball, but at the rate at which technology has been changing and our ability to communicate. If you had told me 10 years ago that I could do anything with my phone other than dial it as a cell phone, which was way bigger than what's in my pocket, I would have said, yeah, not in my lifetime. And here we are. My concern about investing that much in infrastructure that could be then obsolete is that that becomes an anchor and not a way forward. It isn't, that will be the county's decision. We haven't had a discussion about broadband locally because we have internet capacity in most areas of the community in some fashion.
Well, we
And
did address it a few years ago, didn't
we
sir?
addressed the spectrum finishing on Bucks Mills and Millvale, which were the two areas that hadn't. But, there are communities that are looking to take 20 and 25-year loans for millions of dollars to install broadband infrastructure throughout their community, relying on the fact that revenue from people signing up is going to pay those loans. And if a technology isn't still current in 5 years or 6, I'm not sure who's going to pay for it. And that, you know who's going to pay for it. Taxpayers are going to pay for it. So council's free to decide anything. If I had a caution, it would be to think long and hard about a technology base that is changing as rapidly as our ability to communicate is on there's... Anyway, so I sound like I'm negative on broadband. I'm not for right this minute, but if it's not the next best thing in 5 years, we're going to have a lot of hard wire sitting there that's not got a use.
No, I get it. We get the Elon Musk of the world that are going to change things day by day, whether we like it or not. So.
Well, and I got 5G up in Brewer today, so I mean, you can FaceTime, you can video call on 5G. So I don't know if that would serve much on the waterfront to give more.
I guess that one of the really good parts of this funding is that it has a fairly long timeline. We've got a couple of years to really think through this, and some of these things will, I believe, emerge in that time frame. And not that Starlink is going to be the answer for. I mean, we laugh about it, but truthfully, we laughed about half the stuff we can do now 10 years ago. We didn't think we could. At least I certainly didn't think that.
Starlink's where they're starting.
What's that?
Starlink's where they're starting. Who knows where they're going to...
That's right. And who knows what else is already in the works? Because I'm not sure we know that. But yes, the county is looking at, but a $5 million or so that they're looking to devote to it isn't going to go very far. It's going to maybe do one community. It's and whoever that gets to be is going to. If they think they had a fight about providing first responders with equal funding across the county, I can't imagine what's going to happen when they pick one community and the rest get zero out of that.
Well, I got to assume that two come to mind, and we're not one of them.
Yeah.
Pretty much. Anyway, so that's all a discussion beyond our control, but, you know, locally, I really hope that the funds are used in such a way that in 5 years or however, we can look back and say, we did that right. We invested in the things that were important. I think the senior meals is a significant. I think that maybe looking at some of the senior services that we talked about, that, you know, transportation. Those, Jim's idea is a really good one. If we can partner with Down East Transportation to, in a similar way that we have before, even using some of this funding, the rural transportation network is, you know, through DOT, they're looking to expand that too. So, and then we really need to be able to communicate better with the people that we work for, and that means upgrading the system here in a significant way, so that what we're putting out is people can hear it, they can see it, they can, that kind of stuff.
Yeah, we've talked about that long enough. It's
You
time
know,
to.
I think, and that is in response to the pandemic, what have we learned? We have learned that what was okay when put under pressure has some issues.
So are we trying to move this forward?
Well, I'm trying to check things off on the list so that we can come to 10, and then you can, or however many, and then we can go around and see how many want to put these on the list.
One of the, excuse me, I'm sorry, one of the biggest problems I see with our community is there's a help wanted sign hanging in every window, you know, not just here in Bucksport, but statewide. No matter where you go, you're looking at a help wanted sign on the way in. Why? Does anyone have an answer to why that is? What they think is the answer to that?
Nothing beyond anecdotal for me.
Yeah, it's anecdotal for me too.
Yeah.
You think you had, you know, when COVID hit, you had a large population of, I feel, your older workers who retired and they got out of it, and you didn't have people coming back in to it, and so now we're, you know, we have all these places that have openings, and they don't have enough people to work, and
But part of solving that, and we've also got a housing crunch, and how are you going to bring more people in without more housing? I'm not sure we can solve it on this level.
Are we thinking that there is no workforce here to fill these jobs?
I think there's from Dan's point, I think there's a diminished, I mean, our biggest segment is an older generation
Yes.
in Maine, so that would stand to reason if they go on.
Rich discussed this at the last, he had been to a meeting where what was discussed was that many of our small businesses, much of their staff has been people who have retired from a career but wanted to do something. They, not necessarily to, but they worked 20 hours a week, 30 hours a week. It was flexible schedules. It gave them some money. And when COVID hit, they went home and they didn't come back because it was sort of like, it's not worth the risk. I'm just, and so we've lost a whole generation of seasoned people with great flexibility in their schedules and willing to only work 20 or 30 hours and not look for benefits and all that kind of stuff. They've taken themselves out of the workforce, and that's I think for us the biggest loss here is many of those people have not returned. I don't know if they will or if they won't, but because we're an older population community, that's been one of our biggest problems.
Well, and we have a smaller school population, which should fill some of the summer void, you know, with fast food joints and stuff, that there isn't as many kids anymore.
Yeah.
But, I mean, I'm not sure how we could solve that. Maybe
Well, the
somebody else.
state tried by offering $1,500 to every employee who went back to work during a certain period of time because the additional unemployment benefits were running out. So there was an additional, I think it was $1,500 that people got for if they went back to work during this. There were very few takers. And so in trying to incentivize getting people to do things, that's what they tried at the state level to encourage people to go back to work.
I also think, too, there's a shortage in daycare. I'm hearing that a lot on TV, and the people can't go back to work.
Right.
They have no daycare. And with COVID, they're in and out of work. I was just hearing that.
The uncertainty right now for parents with kids in school is that if one day it's open, the next day it could be closed,
Yeah.
and then that's an issue. Which is, from my understanding, from speaking with our superintendent, that the goal of the Department of Education and others is to keep schools open. You know, however you manage it, they're treating some of this like you don't close unless you're in the same predicament you would be if you had a flu population that got you to what. So there's some percentage of students or faculty that are out for it that you then close the
I
system.
used to know it.
I don't remember what the percentage is. I want to say it's 75% or 80 something, some percentage, and that's the way right now that they're approaching this, when to close down and when not to close down, is like under the same conditions that they did. A few years ago, we had the flu so bad in this region that there was, it came
Yep.
this close to the schools having to close for that. I remember that. But anyway, no, it's a,
My thought toward workforce incentive would possibly be some sort of apprentice program where people would have an ability to go to work, maybe start out with an incentive program, apprentice, and maybe move them into these positions. I don't know if that's a possibility, or, I know it worked for decades, centuries. The apprentice was how you got into a job situation. I don't know if that's something that we could somehow help out business owners with, I don't know.
How do we do that as a town?
You as a business owner, you can. It would benefit you to have somebody come into your business and work for you under an apprentice program where the government grant gives you X amount of that man's wages while you teach him to do the work that's necessary to keep your business going.
I see what you mean, so the town would set a pool aside and do that.
Set, yes.
I guess the one concern I'd have with that, Jim, is the managing of it, and how much is going to get eaten up.
Just about to say that, too.
Either hiring town staff or trying to put more on them. I don't know how that would work out.
Well, I would think that it would be the responsibility, or would that be written up in such a fashion, it would be the responsibility of the business owner.
But somebody'd have to oversee that kind of funding, and qualify people. That would just be my concern with it.
Yeah, I guess one thing with this is if we choose 3, 4, 5, 6 things that we want to go after here, even if they have a common theme, I think the bullet down near the bottom, the project administrative costs, are going to have to be something that we take into account. Versus, and we may even need to, if we only decide on 2 projects, that there would be administrative costs. But I would have to think that if we decide on 5 or 6 that aren't, well, if we do things here at the town office, for example, that probably, is fairly easy on the administrative side. If we do some of the rec updates, if we that type of stuff. But if we get, I think, into more than a handful of projects, the administrative costs at some point they grow exponentially based on the different type of stuff we're doing. So I just think once we get past that point, we may need to keep that in mind. If, we only do one or two, dedicate things towards one or two things that are similar, maybe not so much, but.
But it would seem to make sense to at least acknowledge that before we put it out to a
Mhm.
survey and have
Yep.
everybody want something that's not
Yep.
attainable.
Yep.
When do you expect the funds to show up?
We have half of them in the bank right now, and the other half will arrive next year, around this time. We
So-
received the first half. We have $260,000 and change that arrived week before last.
And we have plenty of time to spend it, right?
Well, that's what I was gonna say. I would just caution that we don't make every decision tonight.
Yes.
I don't
Just to
disagree.
roll it
We
out
could
there.
table it
Yes.
for now.
Well, the-
I think everybody on the council put down, helping the seniors with meals and stuff like that. I mean, that's low-hanging
Yep.
stuff that you can go ahead and start funding today. If we have, that's why I was wondering what we had in the bank for money. The services, the transportation things, I think those are sort of things that you can get going today. The waterfront obviously is something that's, we can commit a little bit of money to it, if we have studies and stuff like that. But again, I think we have to make sure that we let's attack some of those things that we can go to right now, and then take some time to think about maybe a couple of these big projects that are standing in the face that maybe we can look at.
And we don't know what's coming in the next year.
We do not. We do not. Which will lead us into another conversation a little bit later.
So one quick question. We ran that senior meals for a year?
No, we ran you mean the free meals
Yeah.
program? We did it from April 1st to July 30th.
Yeah, it's only a couple minutes.
Okay.
We
That-
spent $36,000.
Okay.
Just, I thought someone
So-
might ask me the question.
So roughly it would be 100 grand for a year, roughly?
If you did it under the same way we did before, which was it was 3 days a week, and it was anybody from Bucksport without any qualifier to that, meaning that there were people who could more than afford it, who got it for free, who got it for free.
But I also think, and I think Jim spoke to this the last time, there were folks out there that, once that program went away,
Stop.
stopped, right?
Yep.
Is there, does somebody track that, or do we know where those folks are? That,
Well, I wouldn't point specifically at somebody without,
no, what I'm saying is there a way to, if this gets reinstituted, that those people will be able to get identified so that they could get back into this program? Some of them may not have any means other than us go knocking on the door and saying, this is back again.
I believe they request their meals through the senior center, so probably they would be the ones to ask that question.
They have
But I will tell you that there were times when I would deliver a meal that was ordered, and they were supposed to pay in cash, and they got their meal, and I paid for them for it, I mean,
Yep.
it's something you do.
Yep.
The other option is even if you did 2 days a week at no cost, and because the other thing we have to also think about is the staff that prepares these meals were overwhelmed when we did this last time. This is RSU 25 personnel, and when they were doing 130 and 140 meals a day, it was a lot for those 3 people to do. So,
They were also preparing meals for children also, I believe, right?
yep.
Yeah.
So, even if we thought about this program as 2 days a week and provided funding so that anybody that called. Right now, I know, we got a statement, and the program overall is $9,000 in the black. It's never been $9,000 in the black. That is a direct result of what we did last year. Okay, and the fact that since then, the number isn't 35, it's more like 70 a day, a day. When we started the program, it was 35. About 35 people were from Bucksport. Now I think it's close to 70, or it is a lot. But even if we did the math to figure, because if you start something like this and then, well, that was fun for a year, we're done, we're out of money, then we need to think about some follow-up funding stream or some way to get community buy-in for donations that can continue the program.
I think that's the answer, is that, this is seed money for a lot of things. This isn't meant, I think we've talked about,
Right.
continuous funding. But if this can get the ball rolling on some of that stuff and can identify needs and show that, what is needed out there, I think that in itself, I mean, you just said that, we started out with 35 and now you're at 70. I think that stuff starts to get communicated, that, yeah, there is a true need out here. Like Jim says, I mean, there are more than enough people that are willing to throw some dollars at these things if it's necessary, if it's going to a good cause, and I would rather see that happen than go the other way, and that's just throw money at I'm not picking anything, but just because I said it too, but throw it at the heat pump,
I might add that the least painful thing I do in life is to deliver those meals.
right?
So,
So if we weren't looking to get into the weeds tonight, but we were looking to pick some that because we did talk about sending out a survey to the resident to ask how the people of the community thought this money should be. So
Is this list you have here, is there any ranking on that, or did you just put it down?
I put it down. Waterfront had a lot, first responder had a lot, senior center, senior related items had a lot. The AV system did, the marina did. As I said, the senior stuff was a theme, transportation, meals, that kind of stuff was, a number of them had. Mark, you had all the emails from everyone. I think those are, seniors were a theme, AV stuff was a theme, the waterfront and marina were, first responder stipends were, and the seniors related stuff between meals and transportation and
I don't know if anybody else was
that
on the
kind of
council
stuff.
a couple of years ago when we were talking about jacking up the Historical Society.
Yeah.
Were you on it, you guys?
We all were.
Okay, yeah, and basically got beat into the ground over that. That didn't fly. And I just, what I say is, if we're looking at something else to do with that building, I think that's another one of those things that we take our time and try to figure it out. Let them understand that we are trying to look at a solution.
Yep.
But I hate to throw bad money down there because we know what that building looks like.
Yep.
And just to give them, just to put 50 or 60,000 into it is not helping.
But I think for me, it's like what Mark said, well, maybe we should be looking at something like the Masonic Hall, or we should be looking at other, or I guess I don't want to, where it was a few years ago, they started looking at it, and then it, fades away because we have so many other things going on, and then it's coming back, and then it fades away, and it comes back. So that's just, for me, that's mine, because the more time we waste, the more stuff gets ruined. So, but I just want to work with them and figure out what we can do. So,
And, would it be beneficial to get some numbers on some of this stuff?
Well,
we
that's,
know?
that's where I was going to go next, is you take some of these bigger things, the waterfront, the Historical Society, the marina improvements, the AV upgrades, those are, for the most part, one-time projects
Right.
that are going to have a fixed cost that if we find